The plains lay quiet beneath a sky the color of old iron. Smoke still hung low across the valley, drifting in long, silent ribbons that caught the dawn light and turned it red as blood. What had once been a cabin stood blackened and hollow, its timbers twisted into the earth like broken ribs. The wind hissed through the ashes, carrying the faint smell of pine and something darker, burned flesh, sorrow, and memory. In that stillness, where even the birds had gone, a lone rider appeared over the ridge. Calder Rourke rode slow, his horse's hooves muffled by frost and dust. The pack on his back was heavy with furs from the northern traps, weeks of work traded for survival. He had left this place strong and alive. Now he returned to silence. He dismounted, his boots crunching softly on the blackened ground. The world around him felt hollow, stripped of everything warm. His eyes, pale as glacier water, searched the wreckage as though his mind refused to understand. He stepped through what remained of his home. The iron stove was split open, the table charred to splinters. He found a piece of Alara's shawl caught on a nail, half-burned but still holding her scent, wild sage, and the soap she made from lye. His hand trembled as he pressed it to his face. Then he found what he feared most. 2 small mounds near the hearth, side by side, covered by scorched boards and stones. Beneath them, he saw a child's small wooden horse, half-melted. For a long while, Calder didn't move. The only sound was the wind threading through the trees. He knelt, his shadow falling across the ruins, and lowered his head. No cry came. No curse, no scream. Just the quiet breathing of a man who'd lost everything he was built to protect. The silence around him deepened, and even the wind seemed to bow. By nightfall, he had dug 2 graves beneath the old oak by the creek, a place where Alara used to hang laundry and laugh with their boy. The earth was hard and cold, but he dug with bare hands when the spade broke. He laid them down gently, wrapping what remained in linen, whispering their names like prayers. Rest easy, Alara. Rest easy, Micah. When the last shovelful of dirt fell, he sat there until the stars came. The world around him looked strange and endless, as though it no longer belonged to the living. He stared at the graves, then at his hands, blistered and raw. They trembled once, then went still. Whatever warmth had lived inside Calder Rourke died there with them. He rose before dawn, walking to the ridge that overlooked the valley. Below, the settlement of Red Hollow slept in its own kind of silence. The few lights that still burned in the saloon and blacksmith's shed flickered weakly against the cold. He could see shapes moving behind curtains, faces turning away when they caught his figure in the distance. Calder rode into town as the first sunlight broke through. Horses shifted nervously at his passing. He stopped outside the general store, dismounted, and tied his reins. A few townsfolk stood watching. Mrs. Callum, the storekeeper's wife, old man Avery by the feed barrels, a boy peering from behind a hitch post. Their eyes carried shame and fear, not sympathy. "Calder," Mrs. Callum whispered. "I am so sorry." He looked at her once, his face unreadable. "Who did it?" No one answered. The boy dropped his gaze. Avery chewed his pipe and said quietly, "Darrow's men. Came through 3 nights ago. Took whiskey, burned what they pleased. Sheriff couldn't stop him. He don't try no more." "Where's Darrow now?" "They say up north. Mining Ridge. But son, you don't want to go after that pack. They kill for sport. Best you ride on." Calder's eyes lifted toward the far hills. The morning sun caught the stubble on his jaw, turning it silver. "They took my family. There's nowhere else to ride." A hush fell. Even the horses stood still. Then Calder turned his back to them and walked into the saloon. The doors creaked open to the smell of whiskey and sawdust. Inside, Sheriff Lyle Dunn sat slumped over a table, hat tilted low, a bottle half empty beside him. He looked up, blinking at the sight of Calder. "Rourke," he said hoarsely. "I heard. God help us all." Calder stood before him, expressionless. "Where were you?" Dunn's mouth twitched. "They came in numbers, Calder. I sent word for help. It didn't come. You had a badge. I still got it. Don't mean much anymore." Calder stared at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Keep it. You'll need it." He turned and left without another word. Outside, The sky had darkened to the color of ashes again. The wind picked up, tugging at his coat. He mounted his horse and rode west, toward the canyons that cut through the frontier like scars. The people of Red Hollow watched him go, knowing they'd seen a man carrying his own death beside him. By evening, he reached the edge of the wilderness. The sun dipped behind the cliffs, bleeding red into the sky. He stopped to rest his horse and looked back once more at the valley. Smoke from his ruined cabin still lingered faintly on the wind, curling upward like a ghost refusing to leave. He whispered his family's names again, softer this time, almost like a vow. Then he rode on into the growing dark. The land ahead was wild, jagged ridges, dry riverbeds, and the long stretch of desert where even the coyotes didn't cry. Calder traveled for days, sleeping in the open, hunting little, speaking never. Somewhere along the trail, the man he had been, the husband, the father, the quiet trapper who sold pelts to traders, slipped away. What remained was colder, sharper. He listened to the night, sounds differently now. Every noise a threat or a clue. On the fifth night, beneath a waning moon, he came across a half-frozen wolf snared in iron teeth. Its eyes burned fierce, refusing to die. Calder knelt beside it, studying the trap. He freed the creature with bare hands, careful not to speak. The wolf limped away a few paces, then stopped, turning to face him. For a moment, man and beast looked at each other, two broken things bound by the same loss. Then it vanished into the rocks. When dawn came, Calder's horse stood saddled. The man who climbed onto it was changed. His face carried no expression, his voice no sound. Only the wind moved around him, whispering through the canyon walls as he disappeared into the emptiness. Back in Red Hollow, word spread. Some said he'd gone north to find work with the railroad. Others claimed they saw him deep in the Badlands, walking beside a wolf under a blood moon. Whatever the truth, no one dared speak his name too loudly, not with the Darrow gang still roaming and the smoke of the cabin still drifting in the minds of those who had watched it burn. As night settled over the valley once more, the oak by the creek stood alone, two graves beneath its roots, the wind sighing softly through its limbs. Far off in the canyons, a wolf howled, low, haunting, and endless. It echoed through the cliffs, like the first note of a legend that would one day be told around every campfire in the frontier. The story of the man who lost everything and returned as death itself. Winter turned the canyons white and cruel. Wind carved through the stone like a knife, howling across the ridges where few men dared to ride. The land had changed since the night Calder Rourke vanished into it. Out there, where the stars burned cold above Dead Man's Ridge, something new began to stir. A presence whispered about in every saloon and bunkhouse for 100 miles. Men said the hills were haunted. Horses were found riderless, their saddles torn. Campfires burned to ash without prints around them. Some swore they'd heard gunshots echoing at night, followed by the cry of a wolf. Months passed, and the Darrow gang felt the fear first. They had once moved like kings across the territory. 10 men with fire in their hands and no law strong enough to bind them. But now, they rode with their eyes on the shadows. Boone Darrow, the leader's brother, was found slumped in his saddle near the canyon's mouth, a single bullet through his heart, his revolver still holstered. No one heard the shot. No one saw who fired it. All they found in his pocket was a fragment of burned cloth, a piece of a woman's shawl. The men whispered Calder's name in the dark, though none dared say it outright. They had killed him once, they told themselves. No man could come back from what they did. But the desert kept its secrets, and the wind carried them in strange ways. In the heart of that wilderness, beneath a high cliff streaked with ice, Calder worked in silence. His small fire threw flickering light against the rocks, revealing the shape of a man no longer tethered to mercy. His hair had grown long and gray, his face hollow from cold and hunger. Before him lay a crude forge made from a horseshoe and river stones. Into it he fed melted silver, Alara's wedding ring, his son's little belt buckle, and the buttons from the shirt he wore the day they died. The molten metal glowed white, then poured into bullet molds, hardening into small, perfect instruments of vengeance. He carved each one carefully, etching tiny grooves with the tip of his knife. His fingers shook not from weakness, but from the weight of purpose. Every bullet bore a memory, every memory a name. When the work was done, he sat in the quiet glow of the dying fire, turning one bullet between his fingers as though it were a relic. The sound of the wind carried voices from far away, laughter, cries, echoes of the past. Calder closed his eyes and saw her again, Elara, standing in the doorway, sunlight in her hair. He could hear her voice as clear as day. That final whisper she gave him before he rode to the mountains for the last time. Don't ever let them take your kindness. He looked down at the locket around his neck, the one that had somehow survived the fire. His thumb brushed over the dented metal, over her engraved initials. That part's gone, he murmured. The words felt like stone in his mouth. When dawn came, he moved like a shadow through the canyons. He hunted when he needed, mended his rifle with steady hands, and watched the trails below for the living. He had become something in between, a man still breathing, but closer to the silence that waits after death. Travelers began to speak of figures seen at dusk, dressed in black, his face hidden by dust and brim. He appeared without sound, fired without warning, and disappeared before the smoke cleared. Some said he rode with a wolf at his side. Others swore it was no man at all, only the ghost of the mountains avenging the dead. In Red Hollow, Sheriff Loudon heard every rumor and felt the unease crawl into his bones. He sat in his office one night with his deputy, a wiry kid named Cooper who hadn't yet lost his faith in reason. "You think it's Rourke?" Cooper asked, glancing over the reports. Men missing, wagons burned, bullets found lodged deep in skulls. Dunn poured whiskey into a tin cup and stared at the wall. "I don't know what it is, but I know what it ain't. It ain't peace. Some folks say he's dead. Then they better hope he stays that way," Dunn said quietly. "If he's out there, he's not the man we knew." Far beyond the town, near a bend of the Rio Claro, a family wagon creaked along the frozen trail. The father, a farmer named Harlan Pike, drove the mules through the mud while his wife and little girl huddled beneath a tarp. They were heading west, chasing a promise of land untouched by the gangs that bled the valley dry. But promise had a way of turning on a man. As the sun dipped, 3 riders emerged from the rocks. They rode hard and grinning, guns drawn. "Evening, friend," one called. "Reckon you can spare what you got for travelers like us?" Pike raised his hands, fear rising in his throat. "We've got nothing worth." The outlaw's gun cracked once. The bullet split the lantern hanging off the wagon, spraying sparks across the trail. "You got horses. You got coats. That's worth plenty." The little girl began to cry, clutching her mother's dress. One of the men laughed and stepped closer. "Ain't it funny? How luck always finds us first." The wind shifted then. It came down the canyon like a whisper. The first outlaw looked up. A shadow stood on the ridge above, tall, motionless, a rifle slung low against his shoulder. "Who's that?" he barked. The others turned, but by the time they did, the shadow was gone. A heartbeat later, thunder rolled. One of the men jerked backward, a hole between his eyes. The shot had come from nowhere. "Find him!" another shouted, spinning toward the cliffs. But the only answer was the wind and the echo of his own voice. A second shot. The third man dropped to his knees, gasping, before falling face first into the dust. The last outlaw, the one with the broken tooth and snake tattoo curling up his neck, drew his revolver and fired wildly into the rocks. "Come out, you bastard. You ain't no ghost." Silence. Then a single figure stepped from the shadows, moving slow, deliberate. His coat was dark, his hat pulled low. The light caught his eyes, pale, unblinking, empty as the sky. The outlaw stumbled backward. "It's you," he breathed. "You're supposed to be dead." Calder said nothing. He reloaded, the metallic click echoing in the canyon. "Wait, please. I didn't kill him myself. I swear it was Darrow, not me." Calder lowered the rifle, but didn't holster it. "Tell him," he said quietly, voice rough as gravel. "Tell Darrow Death's riding for him." The outlaw nodded, trembling. Then Calder raised the rifle again, fired once into the man's hat, the bullet shaving the brim clean off. The man bolted, screaming as he disappeared down the trail. Calder turned toward the wagon. The woman clutched her daughter, eyes wide. The farmer stood frozen, hat in his hands. "Are you?" he began, then stopped, unsure what he was asking. Calder simply nodded toward the road. "Keep west. Don't stop till you reach the pines." They obeyed. When they looked back, he was already gone. That night, Calder sat by his fire, the stars cold and sharp above. The wolf appeared again at the edge of the clearing, watching him. Its yellow eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Calder tossed a strip of dried meat toward it. The creature didn't move for a long time, then finally stepped forward and took it. For a brief, fleeting second, something human passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or mercy. He stared into the flames until they dimmed. The rifle lay across his knees, the locket glinting faintly against his chest. In the reflection of the fire, he saw her face again, soft and kind, untouched by the world's cruelty. Don't ever let them take your kindness. By spring, Red Hollow had become a ghost town pretending to live. The Darrow gang rode through its streets like wolves in a sheep pen, boots scraping across wooden boards, laughter echoing through the broken windows. The saloon, once the heart of the town, was theirs now, a place of whiskey, smoke, and fear. Harlan Darrow, a broad man with a scar cutting across his left eye, sat in the old sheriff's chair behind the bar, boots up, glass in hand. He had grown rich off robbery and blood, and his men worshipped him like a god made of gunpowder. No one in Red Hollow dared look him in the eye. The storekeeper paid him to keep the doors open. The preacher stopped ringing the church bell. Mothers kept their children inside at sundown, whispering prayers they no longer believed would be heard. But even monsters can feel hunted. One by one, Darrow's riders began disappearing. A scout found their camp torn apart near Dead Man's Ridge. Horses still tied, fire still burning, men gone. Another was found at dawn, face buried in the sand, a silver bullet lodged clean through his chest. The gang buried what was left of him in silence, afraid to speak the name everyone knew, but none would say. Harlan Darrow spat into the dust and crushed his glass under his heel. "He's just a man," he growled. "No ghost, no devil. A man bleeds like anyone. I'll see to it." He sent for bounty hunters, 5 of them, men who'd killed for coin and whiskey from Montana to El Paso. They rode in with hard eyes and long rifles, took Darrow's money, and rode out the next morning toward the canyons. None returned. Weeks passed, and only their horses wandered back, saddles torn, eyes wild. That was when the laughter in the saloon grew thin, and even Darrow's men stopped drinking at night. Sheriff Lyle Dunn watched it all from the edge of town, hat low, badge tarnished to a dull gray. Once he had been proud, a man who believed the law could save what guns destroyed. But that belief had burned with Calder's cabin. Every night since, he saw that smoke again in his dreams, and every morning he woke with the taste of guilt in his mouth. He'd failed a friend, a family, and a town, and now something older than law was coming to finish what he couldn't. He heard the first rumor 2 days before Calder returned. A ranch hand passing through said he'd seen a man in black riding the ridges, rifle across his back, coat whipping in the wind like the wings of a crow. Dunn knew before the man finished speaking. His stomach turned cold. He finished his whiskey and walked out into the fading light. By dusk, he found himself at the graveyard beyond the creek. The grass grew high there, and the oak still stood above 2 small stones, weathered but unbroken. The sound of boots came from behind him, slow, measured. Dunn turned, hand on his holster. Calder Rourke stood at the gate. He looked older now, his beard streaked with gray, his coat torn from the road. His eyes, though, were the same, ice under frost, still and merciless. He carried his rifle like it was part of his arm, his other hand resting on the locket that hung from his neck. "Calder," Dunn said quietly, removing his hat. "I heard stories. I didn't believe half of them." Calder's voice was rough from disuse. "Believe what you need. Truth doesn't care." Dunn nodded toward the graves. "I came here most nights. To talk to them. I don't expect forgiveness." "I didn't come for forgiveness." The silence stretched between them, heavy and human. The wind pushed through the oak leaves with a whisper that sounded like the past refusing to stay buried. Dunn swallowed hard. "You had your laws," Calder said finally. eyes never leaving the graves. I had my loss. Dunn looked down. You can't fight ghosts, Calder. Not forever. Calder's gaze rose, cold as the grave markers. Then I'll become one. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Dunn sighed and stepped closer. If you're set on ending this, you won't do it alone. I won't sit behind a desk again while another house burns. A flicker of something passed through Calder's eyes. Acknowledgement, maybe even respect. Then we finish it tonight. They worked in silence. The sheriff gathered rifles, old dynamite from a mine shed, lanterns, and ropes. Calder climbed the church tower, dust swirling around him as he cleaned the cracked glass of the bell window. He could see the whole town from there, the narrow street, the saloon's yellow windows flickering, the gallows post leaning crooked by the corral. Below, Dunn moved between buildings, placing lanterns on rooftops, readying signals. The townsfolk watched from behind shutters, holding their breath. By midnight, Red Hollow looked deserted. Only the saloon still glowed, laughter rising like sickness through the cold air. Calder crouched in the tower shadow, loading his rifle. He ran his thumb across one of the silver bullets, feeling the faint ridge of Alara's ring still pressed into it. He whispered her name under his breath, the sound almost lost to the wind. Down below, the Darrow gang stumbled out into the street, drunk and armed. Their leader followed, cigar glowing in the dark. Harlan Darrow looked around and spat. "Whole damn town's asleep," he muttered. "Maybe our ghost finally learned to stay dead." His men laughed, the sound harsh and empty. "Let's wake Emma proper," one said, firing his pistol into the air. The shot cracked against the church walls, echoing into the hills. In the tower, Calder didn't flinch. His eye aligned with the rifle's sight, breath steady, hands calm as stone. Through the lens, he watched Darrow's men swagger and shove each other. Their laughter carried across the square, a sound of men who had forgotten they could die. Dunn stood in the alley near the livery, hidden in the dark, hand on his gun. His pulse hammered in his throat. Calder exhaled slowly. The world went still, the wind, the lanterns, even the bell above his head. Time shrank to a single heartbeat. He saw the man standing closest to Darrow, a heavy-set brute with a red scarf and a cruel grin. Darrow's lieutenant, known for setting fires while family screamed inside. He was mid-laugh, bottle in hand. Calder squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the night like thunder. The lieutenant's head snapped back, the bottle exploding in his grip. He fell without sound, blood spraying across the dust. The gang froze. For a moment, none of them breathed. Then panic ripped through the street. "Up there!" one shouted, firing wildly toward the bell tower. Bullets slammed into the church walls, shattering glass and wood. The bell tolled once, the sound deep and terrible, rolling across the valley like a warning from heaven itself. Dunn stepped into the open, rifle raised. "This town ain't yours anymore," he shouted. The gang spun toward him, returning fire, but Calder had already reloaded. Another crack split the night. One man dropped, then another. Dunn ducked behind a trough, firing back between bursts of dust and splinters. The townsfolk, long silent, began to emerge from doorways, armed with whatever they could hold. Old shotguns, pitchforks, even shovels. The saloon windows shattered. Horses screamed. The lanterns Dunn had placed ignited one by one, painting the street in firelight. The sky over Red Hollow was the color of ash. The church bell hung cracked but ready, its iron tongue waiting for one last sound. Smoke drifted above the rooftops, still carrying the bitter taste of gunpowder from the night before. The town was silent except for the shuffle of boots and the rasp of breath. The people who had cowered for so long now stood shoulder to shoulder in the street, armed with what they could find. Old rifles, shovels, even pitchforks. Sheriff Dunn stood among them, hat low, his badge dulled with soot. Across the square, the saloon door swung open to reveal Harlan Darrow, his face pale with rage and exhaustion. Behind him, the remnants of his gang stirred like cornered dogs. He had lost too many men to silence and shadow, and now the fear he once commanded was gone. The bell tolled once, its deep cry rolling through the morning fog. Then came the crack of a rifle. The first shot struck the post beside Darrow's head, splintering it into dust. A second came from the opposite side, cutting through the sleeve of his coat. He spun, shouting orders, but his voice was drowned by the thunder of returning fire. Windows shattered, doors splintered, the air filled with the smell of iron and smoke. Calder Rourke moved through it all like a shadow given flesh. From the rooftops, the alleyways, behind the shattered church wall, he advanced with the unhurried calm of a man who had already accepted death. Every shot he took was measured, precise. The first outlaw fell clutching his throat, eyes wide in disbelief. The next staggered into the street, hit clean through the chest. Calder didn't flinch. He reloaded, turned, fired again. The townsfolk followed his lead. Their fear turned into something else, fury sharpened by years of humiliation. Dunn shouted commands, guiding them from cover to cover, his voice rising over the chaos. Hold your ground. Make every shot count. Lanterns flickered against the rising smoke. The church bell rang again, this time struck by a stray bullet, and the sound carried across the valley, like a call to judgment. Darrow's men broke first. Those who could run fled toward the stables, but Calder was already there, cutting through the dust. He moved like a ghost through the smoke, coat flaring, rifle never wavering. One man lunged at him with a knife, screaming. Calder sidestepped and fired once, the echo snapping through the still air. Harlan Darrow saw his empire fall in minutes. His men scattered or lay still in the mud, their blood mixing with the morning frost. He looked toward the church tower and saw the faint glint of a rifle barrel turning his way. For the first time in years, he felt a taste of fear in his throat. He fired wildly, backing away, then ran, down the side alley, past the dead horse troughs, past the burned fences and broken signs. Behind him, the town erupted again as Dunn and the others pushed forward, shouting over the gunfire. Calder saw him flee and followed without a sound. The chase led through the edge of town and out into the open plains. The dawn light began to break over the ridge, spilling gold across the land. The smoke from the battle curled upward behind him, fading into the distance. Darrow stumbled through the brush, panting. His hat was gone, his coat torn. He came to the clearing where the ground was still blackened with old fire, the place where, years ago, he had burned a cabin to nothing but memory. He stopped there, realizing too late where his path had led him. From the silence, footsteps approached. Slow, unforgiving. Calder emerged through the smoke, rifle lowered, his face calm, almost sorrowful. The wind stirred his coat, revealing the silver locket around his neck. The dawn light caught it for an instant, flashing like the last spark of a dying star. Darrow raised his gun, hands trembling. "You ain't no man," he spat. "You're a damn ghost." Calder's voice was steady. "No ghost. Just what you made." They stood facing each other across the ashes. The land around them seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. Darrow fired first. The bullet tore through Calder's shoulder, spinning him back. He stumbled, then steadied himself, blood soaking his sleeve. He raised his rifle one last time. The second shot echoed across the valley. Darrow staggered, a dark bloom spreading over his chest. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide, the gun falling from his hand. The breath rattled out of him as he looked up at the man he destroyed and failed to kill. Who are you?" he gasped. Calder stepped closer, voice low as thunder. "The man you should have finished burning." Darrow's eyes went glassy, the life fading from them like smoke in the wind. He fell backward into the ashes, the same soil that had once buried Calder's family. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the blackened grass. Calder stood there, swaying slightly, his breath shallow. The pain in his shoulder burned hot, but his eyes stayed fixed on the fallen man. The vengeance that had kept him alive for so long now felt hollow, its purpose spent. The sun climbed higher, cutting through the smoke and mist. He turned toward the oak by the creek, his legs weak but steady. Step by step, he walked until the ground turned soft beneath his boots and the graves came into view. He knelt beside them, the locket still warm against his chest. The dirt smelled of spring rain, and a single yellow flower pushed through the soil beside Alara's name. He touched it gently. "It's done," he whispered. His hand trembled as he reached for the locket, opening it to see her face, faded now, but still smiling. His vision blurred as the world tilted and dimmed. He leaned against the marker, eyes closing. By the time Sheriff Dunn and the others reached the clearing, the fire was gone and the wind had calmed. They found Darrow's body lying where the old cabin once stood, eyes staring at nothing. Farther down the trail, beneath the oak, they found Calder. He sat with his back against the earth, the locket still open in his hand, his face turned toward the sunrise. Dunn removed his hat and stood beside him for a long while. The townfolk gathered in silence, no words strong enough to meet the moment. When he finally spoke, Dunn's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "They said he rode off into the mountains again," he murmured. "Some say he still walks the canyons, where justice don't reach. Only death itself does." The wind picked up then, carrying dust and sunlight across the graves. The bell in Red Hollow rang once more, distant and solemn, echoing through the valley like the last note of a legend finally at rest.